sound good? Cool. So we are recording the session, and we'll send out that recording afterwards as well. So welcome everyone to our second part of the Transfer Prep Academy series. Today we're going to focus on understanding the PIQs, UC personal insight questions, and how it connects to learning more about yourself, sharing your story, right, when it comes to the UC application process. So welcome everyone. And I guess some housekeeping. Um, More than welcome, please. I welcome any questions, thoughts, concerns in the chat. If you can please check in and sign in with the Zoom poll, that would be great as well. Ah, I'm like going ahead. Trying to think if there's any other housekeeping, but yes, we will send the slides afterwards. Um, so for folks who weren't here for the first workshop that I facilitated on transfer basics, my name's Angelica. I'm one of the counselors at Berkeley City College, specifically with the Undocumented Community Resource Center. So I specifically work with that program, and I'm a proud first generation Latinx student. I started my own journey at community college. I was at community college for 3 years and ended up transferring to UCLA and had a very transformative experience in community college, and definitely navigated the different challenges and barriers. And it was, as the first one, right, could be really scary and intimidating. And I think as I think back around when I was applying, right, we had similar to the personal insight questions, they required a personal statement. And for me, writing has always been particularly difficult. I think I have a lot of anxiety around like writing and especially writing about yourself, right? So I think I look back and think about when it came time when I was working on PIQs that I really left it to the end and it was even more stressed out because I was spending late nights having to write my PIQs and um, I think what ended up helping me is that I received a lot of support in completing my PIQs and had multiple rough drafts and versions that I had mentors, professors, teachers look at, and that really helped me. So I'm hoping to I commend you all, right, for joining this session because the PIQs are an important part of the application process. And I hope that we can kind of shed light and make it less anxiety provoking. So I guess um, for those, if you are compelled to share in the chat, I'd love to learn more about who's in the space today. And I think no matter where you are in the process, because we are here to support everyone. But I'm curious to see if what stage you are in the PIQ process and what you may need support with. Um, Maybe you're just here, right, to learn the basics. Maybe you are applying, right, for fall 2026 and just getting started. Maybe you're ahead of the game, right, and you're at the choosing questions. What is it? Choosing questions. Or maybe you're already editing responses, or maybe you're other, right? Maybe you're just here to learn more. And also if you feel compelled to share around like what's one word, how do you feel about writing PIQs, right? So I'd love to see who's in the space because again, this could be really, at least for me, was a very anxiety provoking process, the writing process, right? And I think the PIQs are the most, for me, was the most stressful part of the UC application and needed, right? So yeah, go ahead and drop your responses. I'm curious where everyone's at. Maybe you're just here to learn. Okay, love the emojis. Yeah, getting started. Yes, could be super anxious and stressful. And again, I hope that we're starting early, right? Um, the UC application isn't due until November 30th. typically. So there's time, right, to really um, learn more, get informed, and based on your writing approach, kind of review your strengths and growth areas when it comes to the writing process. Cool. Okay. So for the most part, it sounds like folks are like getting started, the basics. Um, cool. Because I think in this presentation, just FYI, I feel like I will be repeating a lot of the same information. So apologies if this feels repetitive, but I think I really want to break down the UC PIQs and really go into each question specific. But welcome all. We're here to support everybody in this space. Um, oh, sorry. And I guess as we move forward, another thing I would love if you feel compelled to share in the chat, or if you want to reflect and think about it. I think before we get into PIQs, something interesting to think about for yourself and reflect on your writing approach and what type of writer you are. So doing a quick check-in with yourself, because I think there's no right or wrong way, and we all have our different process, right? But I think understanding how you approach and how you write, especially writing about yourself, may help identify what you may need support in and what those growth areas are. Um, so I identified different types of writers, right? Like you may be a dreamer, right? You like planning, coming up with big ideas and concepts. You may be a type of planner where you like to outline your thoughts first, right? Before writing. Maybe you're a freestyler, right? Maybe you just like to start writing and just let your ideas flow. Maybe you identify as a perfectionist, right? Where you need to get it all right first, right? Before you can get started. Maybe you identify as a storyteller, right? Where you are really invested in the personal stories. Maybe you're more of the researcher, so you like to gather a lot of information first before writing. So I think it's an interesting way, and I'm sure there's more ways we can describe, right, our the type of writer that we are, but I think it's always interesting um, to kind of think about if you've taken your English 1 class, your critical thinking English class, this is going to be a different type of writing, right? Where it's writing about yourself. So curious of like thinking about what type of writer when it comes to writing, how you approach maybe writing assignments or things like that could be helpful. Um, so yeah, maybe something to ponder on as we reflect and continue. Ah, cool. So again, the goals for today is really to help you feel prepared when it comes to writing your PIQs and to have you leave today with a better understanding of the PIQ format, what UCs are looking for, how to structure your responses, some best practices, some resources. Um, yeah, so I definitely want you all to know that you're not alone when it comes to starting the PIQs. There's a lot of support from the transfer center, from staff, peers, right? And there's a lot of resources available to you. But we are today kind of going to break down each of the questions and some best practices of how to approach each question and what they're really asking for. So those are some goals for today. And again, you're more than welcome in the chat to ask questions, and I'll be checking on it as well. And I guess before we get started, I want to quickly review some important deadlines when it comes to specifically the UCs. So again, August 1st is when the UC application opens up for students for fall 2026. But you can start as early on like your transfer admission planner, right? But again, August 1st is when the UC application opens up. Tag, which we're not going to go over tag today, but tag opens up September 1st through the 30th. And then students can start submitting applications October 1st through the 30th, right? So again, the PIQs are a component, a part of the UC application. So just some important deadlines to keep in mind is that it opens up on August 1st. Um, and again, like to open this of like a disclaimer that we're going to cover some general information when it comes to the PIQs. And just remember that a lot of this can depend again on your major, what schools you're considering, right? Everyone's situation can be different. So I encourage you to follow up with your counselor, follow up with the transfer center, and get specific guidance based on you, your goals, and what support that you need. Um, so just want to put that out there. Cool. So let's jump in to this first section around understanding the PIQs, right? Personal insight questions. Again, a very key part of the UC application. And in my opinion, can be the most anxiety provoking piece and probably the part that maybe will take the longest part of your process as working on the PIQs. So what are the UC personal insight questions? So again, these are mini essay questions, short responses that are a part of the UC application that provide the person who's reviewing your application a deeper understanding of who you are, right? So this goes beyond what you are going to know on your application. It goes beyond your grades, the academic achievements, because it's an opportunity for you to showcase your passion, your interest, your growth, right? Your inspirations. So it's an opportunity to, one, showcase your personal experiences, highlight any stories, reflections, what makes you stand out, right? Why are you interested in pursuing this major? Um, and also highlights your unique personal story and who you are, right? Because again, we are more than just our academics, right? It's not just about grades. You also want to showcase your story, right? And give a little bit context of who you are, right? Um, so what do PIQs do? So again, it's a required part of the UC application. Um, and again, to reiterate, it brings depth, a unique personal touch to your application. You can explain, give more context around events, people, ideas of what makes you you, right? Your personal journey, values, challenges, goals, right? So again, it's a space. These questions are a space for you to tell your story that doesn't show up in the grades and the test scores, right? Because again, we're more than just our GPA. We're more than the classes that we took. I think the strongest PIQs go beyond the academics and highlight your growth, challenges you face, leadership, your goals. And again, it's all interconnected about like who you are, what matters to you, and what you've learned right along the way. So I think again, the PIQs, the admissions representatives are reading these to understand a little bit more about you, right? And what makes you a qualified candidate, right? You see eligible, right, for these upper division courses. So yeah, essential part of your application. You want to, it's unique to you, right? It's an opportunity for you to explain people, ideas, what shaped you, and an opportunity to highlight your interests. And that includes extracurricular activities, that includes coursework, right? So for these questions, you're using I statements, right, to share your personal growth. So it's good, right? You want to give yourself time to brainstorm, reflect, write, because sometimes it could be. Well, I feel like we're not taught, right, to write about ourselves, and that can sometimes be stressful, right? Of like, what do we talk about? So it sometimes takes some reflection of like thinking about moments in your life, experiences that you've had, ideas of like what sparked your interest, right, in this field. Um, so yeah, it's kind of opportunity to show some of that personality, um, and be thoughtful around like your responses. Some basics again, and we're gonna go over each of the questions in a bit. But just know that there is one required question, right, for all transfer applicants, and this is around how you've prepared for your transfer for your major. So we'll talk about that, but just know there's one required question, and then there's 7 questions in total that you can write about, and you will choose 3 of the 7 prompts. So you want to choose questions, right, of like what fits. Like for you, you want it to be balanced to show a full picture, right? So you may want to pick different questions that highlight different areas about you, right, and your interests, to write about different topics. Each response, so it's 350 words. There's no minimum, but that is the maximum amount of words. So you definitely want to use that space wisely and be concise and meaningful because it's not a whole lot of, yeah, like sometimes you have a lot to talk about and then we got to cut down, right? So it is maximum 350 words. In total, it's 4 questions, right? Including the required question. And again, lastly, that you want to decide on 3 questions, right, like that are relevant to you and your journey and allows you to share something that maybe is not obvious, right, on your application to help the admission, the reader, right, understand more about your motivation and your goals. Um, I think as a things that I've heard in the past, right, that the PIQs are a little bit more flexible, they're more personal. You're not being graded or tested on grammar or it being formal. So I think something that we hear a lot is that the UCs want your authentic voice, right? They want to understand you. So you also it may be different than how you write, right, in English 1 or the critical thinking English class, right? We maybe want to be a little bit more like answering the question directly, right? And showing, right? And not yeah, being more specific when it comes to answering the questions. So those are some of the basics. And again, just to reiterate around like the UC application process, that it is a holistic process. So they're looking at the whole story. They're not just looking at your academics, your extracurricular activities. When we mean holistic, it's that they're looking at all these different parts, right? They're looking at the academics, your activities, and your PIQs and how that all ties together. So I think this is again where the PIQs come in, that it's an opportunity to showcase more of like who you are, your personality, your goals, if there's any accomplishments that you want to talk about, or your life story, right? How it connects to your major. This is an opportunity for you to talk about it. And again, there's no right answer. PAQs are not essays, it's like your personal narrative. So it's like these mini personal narratives. To talk about things and give context. So reflecting, right? And we'll go through the questions, right? But it's like as we go through the questions, thinking about like if there's been any experiences, right? Moments, hopes, struggles, growth, right? If there's been particular opportunities, classes, volunteer experience, all these different things and how they've shaped you. Um, yeah, because again, it's a holistic process. So we want to fill in the gaps that aren't covered in the UC application, right? And make it personal to you. Um, yes. So again, style of writing is going to be a little bit different, going to be more personal narrative, um, and that you are required to do the 3 questions and the one required question. Any questions so far? Sorry, this may be a little bit repetitive. But again, 4 questions that you need to complete. Um, hi. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Took me all the way back. Okay, so now we're going to break down each of the questions. Um, So again, you can find the PIQ questions are already out. You can look it up. If you type in like PIQs, transfer PIQ, UC PIQs, you'll find a sheet with all the questions listed. So the questions, the responses don't change. I think they haven't changed for a minute. So you can start now, right, to kind of brainstorm ideas. Um, so we'll go over each of the questions and I encourage you to process, digest, see how you would approach this question, right? And we're going to go through different examples of how one might approach the question. Okay. Oh my gosh. Sorry, y'all. Okay. So the required question. So this is the most important question, I feel like, because it's about your major and it's required. So everyone's going to have to respond to this question in 350 words or less. So the required question is, please describe how you have prepared for your intended major, including your readiness to succeed in your upper division courses once you enroll at the university. So again, things that you can consider and think about is, how did your interest in your major develop? Um, do you have any experiences, right? Whether it's formal experiences like in the classroom, right? Or volunteer work, internships, employment, or if you've participated in any student organizations, activities, or outside of that, right? Maybe it's outside the classroom where this interest developed, right? So there's a lot of different examples, but I think for here, you definitely want to reflect and think about how you chose this major. How did it develop? So was there an event, a course, a person, a TV show, right? There could be again, it's personal to you, right? Of how this sparked, right? Your interest in your major. And I think the best way to approach this is reflecting on what that moment was and um, talking and showcasing around like how you have prepared, right? So you want to show your readiness, your enthusiasm in that field, right? In that major. So again, reflecting on if there's been any internships, work, family, right? Why did you choose this major? But then how, and maybe thinking about how that connects to your long-term goals, but explaining that growth, right? Maybe you faced some challenges along the way, right? What impact was that on you? So I think sometimes you want to avoid for this question listing like all the classes that you've taken. Um, I think you want to think about of like how that interest began, how that grew as like a starting point. So again, was there a class, a project, um, anything related to your major outside of class, right? Whether a student club or family, and again, I think it's okay if you have experiences outside of the classroom because you can talk about other things, right? Anything that's special to you that's still related to your major. So yeah, this is the most important question. Um, and again, so something to note is that when you're applying to the UCs, you can apply to different majors for each of the UCs. So if that is your case, if you're applying to one school for this major and another school for a different major, you want to, for your PIQs, you may want to focus on a common theme or connection between all of those majors to kind of to answer this question. Um, yeah. So curious if there's any questions, thoughts, concerns. Yeah. And Zaida provided kind of the breakdown. So I think for this one, again, it's required. All students need to answer this question in 350 or words. Um, but thinking about how did your how did your interest develop in this major? How have you prepared, right? Maybe it's taking those advanced level classes, right? Maybe it's an internship, joining a student club. Um, and I think the next slide I have some. Oh gosh. Oh. So these are some examples. Again, like psychology, an example of how you may want to think about it of like, was it a specific introductory course? Um, was it a personal, right? Example of kind of like what sparked that interest. Computer science, maybe it's that you were helping your mom, you've always been interested in YouTube videos around building a PC, or like you've always helped with technology, Wi-Fi, it started into a hobby and now it's like your passion. Um, and now you want to become like a software developer, or maybe sociology, right? That you've been a cashier part-time and that you've through your job have observed human behavior and you're noticing all these different patterns on race, class, gender, and that's kind of led you to taking a sociology class. So I think there's a lot of, again, it's going to be different and personal for each of us, but thinking about what sparked that interest, how have you prepared, and why you're ready, right? To take those upper division UC classes. Any questions or examples? Otherwise, we will go. Cool. So this next part, we're going to go through each of the questions. So again, there's the required questions, but then there's 7 questions that you can choose from. So we're going to go through each of the options, and just again, breaking it down, thinking about um, how would you answer this question, right? And reflecting on which 3 you would choose, right? So the first question you can choose from is describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. So I think when thinking about this question, um, I think you need to reflect on what leadership means, right, to you. And I think leadership is more than having the title of like a president or a captain. Leadership can mean a lot of different things. Maybe it's right that you've how the example of things to consider, right? Maybe you've taken responsibility on a project. Maybe you've helped others. Maybe you've made a difference in your community, right? So thinking of the type of leadership you have shown. Have you organized an event, group projects? Have you helped someone, right? Maybe you've mentored someone. So thinking about again what leadership means to you, specific examples that may apply there. And then was there certain tasks, important decisions you had to make? How did you make sure things stayed on track? Did you face any challenges, conflicts, disagreements? How did you handle it, right? Because I think the UCs want to know like your problem solving skills, right? Um, what did you learn about yourself, right? I think that's the big piece of like, what did you learn about yourself from this experience? Did it change your approach, right? So I think for this, it could be really intimidating of like, oh, well, I've never been a president of a club or I haven't been involved. But I think leadership can happen anywhere and it's not just a job, it's not just a student club. It can mean taking care of your family, helping out your community, stepping up, right, during a difficult situation. So that all counts as leadership, and it's about the action, right? And what did you learn about yourself? So there's different examples here, but again, know that it's not limited to just formal roles, that it could be how, right, like school, family, community. Um, and you want to answer of like just that example of your leadership experience. How has it impacted others, or how did you resolve if there was a conflict? And explore that growth, right? And talk about you. They want to learn more about you, right? So maybe not going so much about the specifics of the situation and the people involved, but more about how you handled the situation, right? So very much you, right? And not so much the other details. So that's the first question. And I think, again, this question is important. I think the UCs are looking at like, you're showing, right, how you can contribute to the UC campus community, how you work well with others, have you taken initiative, have you made a difference? So I think it shows them a different part of you, right, that is not listed or seen in grades, right, or GPA. So that's the first question. The second question that you can choose from, again, you have options of questions you can answer. The second question is, every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. So similarly, right, if you're thinking about answering this question, I think things to consider and reflect on is, what does creativity mean to you? And I think, again, it's not limited to artistic creativity. It could be how you've solved a problem, right? Um, and think about why that's important. What have you been able to do with that skill? If you use creativity to solve a problem, what was the solution? What steps did you take? What did you learn about yourself, right? Um, and maybe connecting that creativity to your major or future career. So again, I think there's a lot of different ways that creativity shows up. I think for STEM majors, right, that for STEM or any major, there's complex problems that require solutions, right? So I think you can think about how you have a creative approach to solving a problem. Maybe there was a group project, maybe there was some type of research you conducted, or data you were analyzing. I'm not sure, but right, it could be of like thinking how you approached that question creativity, yeah. Um, and how that demonstrates, right, that you can approach difficult situations, right, and come up with new innovative solutions, right? Um, so I think, again, this question, not limited to artistic, but it can be, right? But thinking about if like there's a creative skill, hobby, um, how that's impacted your school life, right? How does it connect to your major? So again, we always want to connect it back to you, how you've grown. Because I think for this question, UCs want to see like, are you able to think outside the box? Are you able to show your creative side to grow and help individuals? So you want to show that as that unique strength, right? And that you're coming in with a new perspective, potentially. Cool. Third question is, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? So again, I think these questions, you want to hype yourself up, like you are your hype person and you want to showcase um, things that you're proud about, right? So for this question, if you choose to write this question, thinking about like if there's a talent or skill that you're proud of, this is the time to share it, right? This is the time to talk about what that talent or skill is. It doesn't have to be something that you've received recognition or awards in. But if you did, yeah, you want to talk about that. If you did get some type of recognition or award, but I think you want to talk about if whatever that skill or talent is, why that's meaningful to you, how you've developed that skill over time, what have you learned about yourself? Is it something that you've used in or out of the classroom? How does that fit in, right? So I think thinking about if there's anything that you enjoy doing, right? Again, you don't need any formal recognition, but something that matters to you, thinking about how did you get this talent or skill? How did you use this talent or skill? Do you use it at school to help people? Um, in different opportunities. So again, I think this question, the UC is what they're looking for. It's, I think, an opportunity to really show your strengths. Again, not beyond grades, right? Show a little bit about you, your personality, how you've grown, and what you're passionate about, right? That isn't just maybe your major. Maybe it can be connected to major, but I think could be a good opportunity to showcase some of the a little bit about your talents and skills and talk about it. So maybe it's a problem solving ability. Maybe it's that your ability to listen to others, right? And understand different perspectives, but you want to come up with examples, right? For these, for whatever that skill or talent is. So that's that option. Any questions so far before we move to the fourth? Um, Fourth question that you have the option to answer is describe how you've taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you faced. So I think this is an opportunity, right, to chat about if there's anything that's added value, right, to your educational experience that's helped you prepared for college. So maybe you were a part of a learning community, honors classes, um, yeah, like anything that's added value to your academic journey, right? So those are some examples, and you can also choose to write about any barriers that you faced, right? And how you've overcome those barriers. Um, so and again, how that's connected to you, your journey, right? And who you are today. So there's an option of like you can talk about an opportunity you've taken advantage of, right? So again, I think some if you're part of a special program, learning community, or any opportunities, right? Academic opportunities you've taken advantage of, or speaking about like overcoming any educational barriers you may have faced, right? Um, Again, right, like reflecting on if there's been any challenges or obstacles that you faced in your academic journey. You want to talk about that, but also how you faced those challenges, right? What you've learned about yourself, what opportunities did you take advantage of? Um, so there's a lot of, I guess, other examples of like the educational opportunity of like maybe participating in clubs, on like special academic programs, tutoring, mentorship are some examples. And educational barriers, thinking about if in your journey there's been any specific barriers, right, in your journey, whether that's personal, financial, maybe health challenges, right, that have affected your education. Writing about that, but also connecting it back of like how you've um, how you've overcome that, right? And how it's all connected and how you've grown as a person. Cool. So that's one option. Um, the next one. The next question is kind of similar, low key, is describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you've taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic um, achievement? So again, I think this is very personal and reflecting around like if there's been any big challenges you face and you want to talk about how you've overcome those challenges. Did you get support from others? Did you find it all on your own? How did it change you, your grades, motivation, relationships? So again, it could be personal, school, family, health. There's a lot of different things, right? Um, And are you still dealing with it, right? What are you doing now? How has it impacted you? But how have you overcome, right? Any challenges? So I think again, if you faced any specific challenges that you feel open to sharing and talking about, this could be a good opportunity to give context to what those moments were, right? And show that resilience, show that you've accessed resources, right? What are you doing now? How has it affected you? So I think this could be an opportunity to give context to that. And then the last two, right? There's the sixth question. And what have you done to make your school or community a better place? So this is a fun question, right? Like think things to think about, right? If you choose to answer this question is um if there's been any opportunities, right, in community college, any projects that you've been a part of, think about how you define community, right? Talk about what your role was, how you helped fix something, right, in your community, what inspired you, how did those actions benefit others? Did you work in a group, alone? And I think you want to show, right, like your passion, your interest, right? And how you went about like making your community and promoting positive change in your community. So this could be a fun question again to show a different part of yourself, right? That's not just about academics. Um, so that's always a fun question. And something to note, and I think I talk about it a little bit at the end, but I definitely recommend as a transfer student to talk, if you're able to mention experiences, more relevant experiences. So not much high school. I would say if you're able, if you did attend high school, I would say to talk about experiences in community college or recent experiences, right? I think that would be beneficial. And then lastly, the seventh question that you can choose from is, and this is another fun question, is beyond what you've already shared in your application, what makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admissions to the University of California? So I feel like this is super fun that again, this is an opportunity to share interests, passions, things that make you unique, right? So if there's anything you didn't mention in your application and you want the admissions team to learn more about you, this is the space to do it. So if you want to highlight a specific skill, talent, challenge, opportunity, this is the question, right? From your point of view, why you make a good choice, right? An excellent choice for the UCs. And again, all these questions you should be bragging, right? You should be highlighting, right? What you've learned about yourself, how it's all connected. So I think this is another fun question of like what unique interest, hobbies, talent, skills, things you want to highlight. Um, trying to think, I had one student, I feel like I had one student talk about one time like their passion and interest in like in reading. I like Harry Potter, right? Like all these different things. Like I think you can make it fun, right? Like if you're into astrology, this could be like a good question to talk about your sign, what makes you you. So I think it could be a fun question to answer and unique to you. Okay, and I do want to know time. So I might be kind of speeding through a little bit more of the writing pro tips. So those are the questions. There's seven questions, and then there's the required question. So you have to decide, right? You have your required question, but then from the seven, you choose three to write about. So as you think about how to approach these questions, just to reiterate, some tips for writing these narratives, these personal narratives about yourself is, and we'll go through each one individually, but being authentic, right? They want to learn more about you. So sharing personal stories that reflect your true self. Be specific, right? have concrete examples that illustrate and answer the question, right? Be concise, be specific, answer what the question is asking, and then showing the growth, right? The learning experiences. What did you learn about yourself based on whatever the moment, event, right? Skill, talent is. So I think it's important to reflect on your experiences, how it has shaped you, your goals, your major, and making sure that you're answering the question. So it's a little bit different, right, than um, like English 1 or critical thinking English. Like you're having to directly answer the question, right, and providing specific personal examples. So when we break it down, I think um again that it's about being genuine and person and think about you personally, right? That they aren't admissions representatives aren't looking to have the perfect essay. They're looking to understand who you are, your real experiences. So being your authentic voice and writing as you, right? And not try writing like someone you're not, right? So again, this means sharing specific moments that have shaped you, um, whether it's overcoming a challenge or helping out at home or exploring a passion. Um, being specific. So an example of like, instead of saying I want to help people, right? Because that could be very vague, being very specific about a moment, whether maybe you volunteered or um, something that's been impactful, right? That sparked that interest, right? In helping people learning more about human behavior. That's just an example, right? That could be used. But I think thinking about concrete examples for these questions, right? And thinking about moments, and maybe that could help to start writing, right? Of like examples for each of these questions. Because it's very important, I think, again, UCPIQs are a little bit different. They're not essay questions. You want to be specific, right? You're rather than making very vague broad statements, you want to provide evidence, concrete examples of the action, right? The achievement, you, right? So you want to bring that story to life and have them understand, not have them understand like also what you did, but why it matters to you. What did you learn about you, right? So an example is like, oh, instead of saying like, oh, I've had several leadership roles, describing a time, a moment, a project, something you've developed, right? And giving context, providing that depth so that the admissions team could really clearly see your growth impact. And that kind of leads, right, like the highlight. So in each of these questions, I think the UC system wants to see how you've grown. I don't feel like they want you to be like the perfect individual student, right? They want to see that growth. How have you learned? How have you developed through real life experiences? How have you overcome challenges? How are you working towards your goals, right? So I think thinking about when you're answering these questions, reflecting on moments, right, that have been impactful to you. What shaped you who you are today, right? What have you learned from those experiences? How has it impacted your academics, um, your resilience, time management, being adaptable, right? How have you balanced work and school and managed everything, right? Those are just some examples. Um, but you want to show these qualities, right? Of like, what was that moment? And what was the growth? What did you learn more about yourself? And then I think this is the last one around like connecting your experiences to your goal. So just making sure as you answer these questions, thinking about, right, like how that influenced your academic and career goals, right? Explain how transferring to a UC aligns with your aspirations and goals. So again, highlighting specific programs, opportunities, experiences, um, whether it's Psych Club, right? And that kind of sparked your interest in psychology, and now you want to pursue a career in mental health. So that could also be a good opportunity to highlight how transferring to a UC fits your career, academic goals, right? How it's all connected. So I encourage you to reflect, right? Of like, if you're going to talk about a past moment, talk about like also the present, but future, connecting it to your goals. And then lastly, again, that these questions take time, right? Oftentimes multiple transcripts to improve, right? So I think focus on just starting some rough drafts, writing, again, thinking about how you approach writing and what works best for you. And then I think having enough time to seek feedback, whether it's from mentors, writing center, peers, instructors, to strengthen your responses. So know that the transfer center, the team is always here to support you as you're writing through your drafts and asking for support. I definitely recommend and encourage you all to ask for that feedback. So there's always different workshops that happen in October, November around like PIQ support. And something else I wanted to mention, I guess, oh my gosh, with time. I guess lastly, something that comes up a lot I feel like is I also get students who feel like maybe they weren't as involved in clubs or school activities because they had to work, right? Or had other family responsibilities that kind of impacted their ability to be involved, right? But I think involvement is more than just clubs or academic things, right? It's the responsibilities you handle. It's caring for your family, working full time, part time, volunteering. So it can be informal too, right? So know that just don't count yourself out if you're thinking about like, well, I haven't had any of these opportunities or experiences. Um, you can also talk about any, yeah, like family responsibilities, work, any struggles, personal things, right? Something that you're learning, hobbies, right? That there's a lot that we can connect. And if you ever have questions or struggles with that, you're more than welcome to check in with a counselor and let's talk about that, right? And then something else that I hear a lot from students that I kind of wanted to talk about, um, that these questions could, again, you are going to share what you feel ready to and feel safe discussing in your PIQs. So don't feel pressured to talk about something that you're not ready to disclose. Because again, these questions can be very personal, deeply personal. And one of those things is around like mental health. And I get a lot of like, oh, will I be penalized, right, for talking about mental health or any um mental health is an example, but I think it could apply to any um kind of situation that's deeply personal. And I think again that if you feel safe talking about it and you feel that it's an important piece to your story, that it's something that you can definitely discuss. And what we've heard from admissions, like that they're not judging, right? Counselors, colleges aren't judging. They just want to understand your story. So again, if it's something that you want to disclose and talk about because it's an important part of your journey, that you should feel like that is a space to share any experiences that directly answer those questions. But I encourage you to also check in with your counselor if you have more questions around that. Um, so just kind of as a wrap up, right? Again, you have your one required, you have the three questions that you need to answer. So thinking about um, sharing and thinking about which questions are going to show different moments, experiences about you. Try to choose stories that complement each other. Try not repeating the same ideas or stories, right? You want to show a rounded picture about you. So I think you want to talk about a lot of different things to create that your narrative, right? So finding that balance. And when you're thinking about your writing process, what your strengths are and what your needs are, right? If you find writing anxiety provoking, um, check in, get that support from the writing center, right? Maybe it's time to just like freestyle and start just free writing each of these questions. That wherever you are in your process, that there is always support here. So again, just some pro tips. Give yourself time, especially if, right, this is the perfect time, summer, to just start brainstorming, right? So giving yourself enough time, especially if you're gonna go through multiple drafts and seek revision, making a list. Maybe you want to spend summer making a list of your accomplishments, activities, lessons learned, experiences, right? And just dumping everything in there. Um, Another thing, again, that you're talking about yourself. So thinking and reflecting about when you're writing, it's going to be using I statements. And again, when you talk about something, the reflection, right, of like what you've learned about yourself, your interests. So breaking it down, right, that we want to learn about you. So this is just like an activity, I think, if you have time this summer to kind of just brainstorm, create a brag sheet. So again, I encourage you to start reflecting on how you would answer these questions. And then again, you'll get the presentation, but if you're wondering about how your application is being reviewed, I encourage you to go to these websites around how applications are reviewed for each of the UCs. And then if you are curious around like the transfer student profiles for each of the campuses, so you can get idea generally of like um, the the students that were admitted, right? And get an idea if that's helpful in your process. Yeah. And then lastly, if folks could fill out the evaluation, I know that we're at time. If you could please give us some feedback, give us some evaluation, take some time to do that. The next workshop is next week on the UC extracurriculars. So that's a different component of the UC application, but again, they're all interconnected. So feel free to stop by next week at 5 for that workshop. Um, I'm gonna hang out. I know we're at time, but I'll hang out if folks have any specific questions, concerns, or feel free in the chat. Um, but thank you all. I hope it makes things less stressful or maybe more stressful. But again, know that you are not alone. We're here to support you and that we are resources. So I'll hang out if folks have any additional questions, concerns.